Packs liked to pretend their laws were medicine, but most of what they called purity was fear dressed in ceremony. They spoke of healing while sharpening exile into a blade, spoke of honor while buying witnesses, spoke of the moon as if cruelty became holy when performed beneath white fire. Luna Stormborn had believed that order for years, because belief was safer than seeing. On the night they dragged her to the Temple of the Moon with her wrists bound in silver thread and rain soaking her dress to her skin, she understood the true doctrine at last. Once marked as fallen, a wolf could be used for any purpose, and no one would call it sin. The temple steps were slick, black stone gleaming under stormlight. Torches hissed in the wind. Wolves from 3 neighboring packs crowded the lower ring, their cloaks stamped with pure fangs hooked crescent. Luna could smell wet fur, lamp oil, iron, and old fear. Her own breath came short and thin around pain that had not faded for weeks, a deep ache under her ribs and across her lower back, where her body had begun to change in ways she guarded with both hands whenever no one was looking. Cale waited at the altar as if he had been born to it, tall, silver-eyed, smiling for the crowd. Her elder cousin had once taught her how to set broken traps and read river currents by moonglint. Now he wore a white ceremonial coat lined in black wolf fur, and the cult sigil on his throat glowed faintly with pigment and oil. "Luna Stormborn," he said, voice carrying easily over thunder. "You stand accused of carrying a traitor's bloodline and concealing forbidden union." She swallowed. "I never took a traitor as mate." A ripple moved through the crowd, not sympathy, only appetite for spectacle. 2 witnesses stepped forward, both from Cale's inner circle. One held a ledger with her forged signature beside supply transfers she had never seen. The other displayed a torn ribbon, once part of a scouting uniform, claiming he had found it in her quarters with hidden correspondence. Luna knew that ribbon. Cale had taken it from the training shed 3 days ago. She tried to speak again. "That record is false. He planted that." Kyle raised a hand, and 3 voices shouted over hers in practiced rhythm. "Liar! Blasphemer! Corrupt vessel!" He turned toward the moonstone basin and dipped his fingers into ash. "By pure Fang decree, contamination must be cut from the body before it spreads to the pack." Then he faced her and lowered his voice so only she could hear. "If you beg, I will make it short." She looked at him, truly looked, searching for any remnant of kinship. She found calculation, and beneath it a private panic she did not yet understand. "You forged all of it because you're afraid." His jaw tightened for one instant. Then the smile returned. "I am afraid only of rot." They forced her to her knees. The temple priestess held her shoulder while Cale drew a heated ritual blade through the old pack sigil over her collarbone. Pain struck bright and immediate, a clean white line that stole her breath and bent her forward. No one reached for her. No one spoke her name except to condemn it. "Sigil removed," Cale declared. "Former bond line voided. Her womb carries blight against wolf blood." The word hit harder than the blade. Blight. She heard murmurs swell, felt heads turning away as if she were already carrion. She pressed her palm over her abdomen, protective by instinct, and a guard yanked her wrist down. Cale crouched beside her and tilted her chin up. Rain tracked down his face like tears that were not tears. "Listen carefully, cousin. A rejected wolf can never bond again. You know this law better than anyone. You are not a woman now. You are evidence. And evidence burns." He stood, raised his arms and called for sentence. "Exile to the marsh border. No healer may aid. No pack may shelter. Any wolf who offered her bread, fire, or medicine would lose rank and land." The temple howled approval. By dawn, they had loaded her into a cage cart used for smugglers and left the paved ridge for the marsh roads where reeds cut at wheel spokes and black water swallowed sound. 2 cult enforcers rode beside her, playing dice on the crate lid while she shook with fever and tried not to retch from the motion. Every jolt dragged fire across the new burn at her shoulder. Her ankles were swollen enough that her boots bit skin raw. The child shifted once, then went still, and terror moved through her so fast she nearly screamed. "I am still here," she told the small quiet beneath her heartbeat. "Stay with me. Just stay." At the border marker, a leaning post carved with old territorial runes, they opened the cage and hauled her out by both arms. Rain had turned to sleet, needling her cheeks and neck. One enforcer cut the binding at her wrists and shoved her toward the reeds. "No road east," he said. "No village south. You drink marsh water and pray it's kinder than the cult." The other laughed. "If scavengers do not find you first." Luna stumbled, caught herself, and turned back. "Kale knows the documents were forged?" "Of course he knows," the first one said with mild surprise. "He paid for them." Something in her chest went very still. Not numbness, clarity. "Why?" she asked. He shrugged. "Because dead bloodlines do not challenge thrones." They rode off without another glance. Wind dragged through cattails in long, whispering bands. Luna stood alone with sleet in her lashes and mud swallowing her boots, listening to the cartwheels fade. Her body wanted to fold. Her mind wanted to lie down beside it and stop. She imagined doing exactly what Kale expected, disappearing into cold water, becoming rumor, cautionary tale, proof that punishment worked. Then she remembered a conversation from 2 nights earlier, half heard through stone walls while guards thought she slept. Blood eclipse, ancient circle, broadcast through seers, the cursed vessel displayed before all packs. Displayed, not merely discarded. Kale had not exiled her to let her die quietly. He had exiled her where no lawful healer could touch her, where fear could soften her into capture, where his hunters could retrieve her when the moon turned and call it righteous purification. If she stayed in the marsh, she would not vanish. She would be taken back in chains and used. She pressed both hands around her abdomen and forced a breath through pain. "No." The word came out hoarse, then stronger. "No." Her choice did not feel brave. It felt like grabbing a ledge with numb fingers. She would reach the military supply road west of the marsh, where neutral patrols still answered to border law, not cult decree. Pure Fang had influence there, but not total control. If she could put one official record between herself and Kale's theater, one witness outside his circle, she might live long enough to speak. By the second hour after dusk, sleet became rain, heavy and cold. She moved through reed beds and hummocks by memory from childhood hunting routes, one hand on her belly, one on branches slick as fish skin. Mud sucked at each step. Twice she fell and tasted peat and salt. Once she froze under a fallen trunk while mounted scouts passed within 20 paces, their lanterns swinging dull orange through mist. "Orders are to recover the vessel alive," one said. "Alive enough," another answered. They moved on. Luna stayed in the mud until their hoofbeats disappeared. Her shoulder throbbed where the sigil had been burned away, each pulse a reminder of what was supposed to define her forever. Rejected wolves never bond again. Rejected wolves are finished. Rejected wolves should be grateful for clean death. She had built survival around those laws because the alternative was madness. Yet the child moved again, small and deliberate this time, as if answering her thoughts with stubborn rhythm. Not finished, then. Not yet. Near midnight, she reached the supply road, a strip of packed gravel raised above flood channels, marked by iron stakes and dull blue boundary lamps. She climbed the embankment on her knees, hauling herself by handfuls of grass. Her vision narrowed at the edges. Rain blurred light into halos. Somewhere down road, an engine wagon rattled, then faded away. "Stay awake," she whispered. "Stay awake, Luna. Stay." Bootsteps approached from the western checkpoint, steady and unhurried. A soldier's silhouette emerged through rain, broad shoulders beneath a plain border cloak, no noble insignia, only a weathered patch at the chest. He carried a lantern low in one hand and set it down the moment he saw her. "Do not move," he said, not as command, but care. "You are bleeding." She tried to push up, failed, and slid back onto wet gravel. "If you know my face, you should leave." The soldier knelt anyway. Close now, she saw dark hair plastered by rain, a scar near his brow, eyes an ordinary brown that missed very little. He shrugged off his cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders with precise, efficient gentleness, avoiding the burned skin without being told. "I know what frightened people are saying," he replied. "I also know border law still counts for something tonight." Thunder rolled overhead. He slid one arm beneath her knees, the other behind her back, and lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Heat from his body cut through her, shaking in a way that felt abrupt, almost shocking. As her cheek brushed the rough fabric at his throat, a low thrum moved through the space between them, subtle but undeniable, like distant drums felt through stone. Luna's breath hitched. The child, restless for hours, went suddenly calm. The soldier stilled for a fraction of a second, grip tightening, then eased his hold as though afraid of hurting her. Something ancient looked out through his eyes and vanished just as quickly. "My name is Marcus," he said quietly. "Marcus Nightshade. You are safe until morning." Luna wanted to argue that no one was safe anymore. Instead, she closed her hand in his cloak and held on while rain fell hard around them, and he carried her toward the watchtower lights. The watchtower rose from the rain like a broken tooth, half collapsed on one side, its upper platform open to the sky where old fire had eaten the roof beams years ago. Lanterns burned along the lower wall, shielded in iron cages, and beneath their light Luna saw carvings cut into the stone foundation. A crowned wolf, a ring of thorns, a crescent split by a vertical line. Not pure fang, older. Law marks from the border compacts that predated Kale's cult by generations. Marcus carried her through the outer gate without slowing. 2 sentries moved to block him, then stopped short when they saw who held her. One of them, a woman with rain running off her braids, opened her mouth to challenge and changed the word at the last instant. "Report, sir." "Later," Marcus said. "Heat water. Send for broth. No one enters the east room unless I call." The sentry's gaze flicked to Luna's face, recognition hardening her jaw. "Pure Fang riders passed an hour ago. They posted writs. They are calling her a stolen vessel under purification claim. She is under border protection now." His voice stayed quiet, but the stones seemed to carry it. "Log it in the nightbook with my seal." The woman hesitated. Then she pressed her fist to her chest in formal assent and ran. Luna felt the shift as clearly as if someone had pulled a blade from a sheath. Ordinary soldiers did not give orders that way. Ordinary soldiers were not obeyed through old forms at a ruined outpost in the middle of storm country. She turned her head against his shoulder, trying to see his expression, but his face stayed angled toward the corridor and the room ahead. Inside, the east chamber had once been a watch office. Now it held a narrow cot, a scarred table, stacked crates, and a hearth that smoked until Marcus dropped to one knee and rebuilt the draft with practiced hands. The fire took in 3 breaths, then steadied. He set her down gently on the cot, crouched to remove her boots, and paused with his fingers on the laces. "May I?" he asked. No one had asked her permission for anything in weeks. The simple question hit like grief. She nodded. He loosened the soaked leather a fraction at a time, careful around the skin rubbed raw at her ankles. Her feet were swollen, mottled with cold, and she flinched despite herself when air touched them. Marcus did not pretend not to notice. He wrapped each foot in dry cloth from a chest near the hearth, then rose and hung his wet cloak by the fire before returning with a canteen. "Small sips," he said. She drank, coughed, drank again. The water tasted of tin and mint leaves. Better than marsh water. Better than fear. Outside, boots thudded in the corridor, voices low and urgent. She caught fragments through the half-shut door. If Pure Fang files a demand, we are outnumbered by morning. He gave Royal Claw's wording at gate. Did he really invoke it, quiet fool? Luna's pulse climbed. Royal Claws. The same protection language that sat buried in the oldest law tablets, and was almost never spoken because almost no one alive had standing to use it. Kale had boasted for years that the Alpha line was diluted and ceremonial, useful for pageants and breeding alliances, nothing more. Yet here, at a rain-battered tower on a forgotten road, soldiers had gone silent at one man's voice. Marcus returned with a blanket, shook it once to warm it near the fire, and settled it over her legs. You are shivering from blood loss and cold. I need to clean the shoulder burn. It will hurt. It already hurts. His mouth shifted, almost a smile, gone in a blink. Fair argument. An older man arrived with a pot of broth and set it on the table without crossing fully into the room. He carried himself like retired military, despite the kitchen apron tied over his wool shirt. His gaze rested on Luna for one beat, assessing injury, then moved to Marcus. Perimeter doubled. North lamp gone out in the wind. I will relight. Thank you, Bren. The man dipped his head with unmistakable respect and left. Not fear. Loyalty. Luna watched the door close and felt the old training in her bones begin to map danger and possibility. This was not a random border shelter. This was a controlled point. Lightly staffed but disciplined. Manned by wolves who still used pre-cult law and answered to a command structure Kale had either failed to crush or never found. She had crossed into territory that still remembered another order. An hour past midnight, rain softened to a hard drizzle, tapping the stone like fingers counting down. Marcus set the broth over coals, then took flat river stones from a basket by the hearth and laid them at the edge of the grate until they warmed. He wrapped 2 in cloth and handed them to her. Lower back, he said. It can ease the cramping. She stared at him. How do you know that? He looked at the floor for the first time, as if choosing which truth to offer. I have seen too many women pushed through hardship while men called it discipline. Heat helps. She pressed the wrapped stones against the ache below her ribs. Relief spread slowly. Not miracle, but enough that she could breathe without biting her lip. Marcus poured broth into a wooden cup and sat beside her, close enough to catch it if her hands shook. They called you Blight, he said, voice roughened by contained anger. That word has no legal standing under border code. Pure Fang does not care about code. Some of us still do. Some of us. The phrase settled in her like a small, stubborn ember. She drank in measured swallows while nausea rolled and receded. Each time she paused, he waited without impatience. When she woke from a brief, jerking doze to the memory of temple torches and Kale's blade, Marcus was still there, elbows on knees, humming under his breath. The tune was old warrior cadence, one she recognized from pre-war camp records kept in sealed archive rooms, not common barracks music, not a song a low border soldier would know unless he had been taught inside command circles older than the cult. Who are you? The question rose and stayed behind her teeth. He brought a basin of warm water, clean cloth, and a narrow tin of salve that smelled of pine resin and bitter root. Luna, I need to see the wound. I will not touch until you say yes. She swallowed. Yes. He moved behind her to untie the damp collar at her shoulder and fold the fabric away. Cool air hit the burn, then a deeper sting when he cleaned along the edges where ash and grit had settled into torn skin. She held still by force, jaw tight, hands braced on the blanket. Marcus worked with the concentration of someone disarming a trap. No wasted motion, no roughness, no assumption that endurance meant consent. When he reached the place just above her collarbone where the old rejected bond scar crossed the fresh ritual cut, his fingers paused for the fraction of a breath. Then skin met skin. Heat lanced through her. Not fever, not pain. A molten line surged from the base of her throat down through her chest and into the cradle of her abdomen, bright and fierce, like forged metal drawn through water and somehow emerging stronger. Her back arched against instinct. The cup on the table rattled. The baby, restless and tight all night, went utterly still, then settled with a calm she had not felt since before the tribunal. Marcus sucked in a sharp breath. She turned, and for one naked second his control fractured. His eyes flashed from human brown to molten gold. The room seemed to narrow around that color. Not reflected firelight, not trick of storm lamps. Gold alive with depth, with memory, with a predator held on the thinnest leash. A low vibration moved between them, pulse, answering pulse, until she could not tell where hers ended and his began. He stepped back as if distance could undo what had already happened. "No," he said under his breath, the word aimed at himself, not her. Luna could not move. The laws she had been fed since adolescence shattered in rapid, jagged pieces. Rejected wolves never bond again. Rejected wolves are sealed, hollowed, finished. She had repeated those lines like prayer because they explained why breathing still hurt years after her first bond had been ripped apart in public. If the damage was permanent, then her emptiness had structure, rules, meaning. Now one touch had blown a hole through that whole architecture, and hope rushed in so fast it felt like terror. I know this is him. I know him. I do not know how that can exist and still be true. My body is reaching toward him and my mind is still kneeling on temple stone. If I lean forward, I could lose everything. If I pull away, I might be refusing the one thing that has ever answered me without cruelty. The child is quiet. The child trusts this scent. Am I allowed to trust what my blood recognizes when every law says I am already used up? Marcus braced both hands on the table, knuckles white. The gold receded by increments, leaving amber at the edge of his irises before brown closed over again. He did not look at her immediately. When he did, it was with the raw caution of a man standing at the lip of a ravine he had spent years pretending was not there. I should have guarded the contact, he said. I thought I could manage it. Manage what? He met her gaze fully then, no deflection left. The bond. Thunder rolled far off now, moving east. In the quieter room, she heard the fine details. Rain ticking on stone, wood settling in the hearth, the synchronized rhythm of two heartbeats refusing to separate. Marcus sank slowly to one knee in front of her, not in worship, not in surrender, but in deliberate equality. I do not claim anything from you, he said, each word precise. Not tonight, not ever without your choice. But what happened was real. Luna's hand lifted before she decided to move. Her fingers hovered over his wrist where his pulse beat hard under skin, marked by faint, hidden runes that had begun to glow through the damp cloth of his sleeve. She did not touch. Not yet. Outside the door, the corridor fell silent, as if the tower itself were listening. Inside, their eyes locked and held, and the old world that had named her broken failed to reassemble. The silence held for another breath. Then Marcus lowered his gaze first, as if giving her room to step back from the edge. He reached for the cloth and salve again, but he did not close the distance. Do you want me to finish dressing the wound? He asked, or leave the supplies and wait outside? The question was so plain that it almost undid her. Men who wanted power usually hid it in kindness, wrapped command in soft words, and called that mercy. He was doing the opposite. He put every choice in the open, where she could inspect it. Finish it, she said, voice unsteady. He nodded once. Tell me if anything feels wrong. When he came near this time, his touch stayed clinical and careful, fingers steady even when his pulse betrayed him. He spread salve along the burn and bound her shoulder in clean linen, never once letting his hand stray to the curve of her throat, where bond scent ran strongest. The restraint was not coldness. It was effort, visible and deliberate, like a warrior bracing a gate against floodwater. Luna watched his profile in firelight, the scar near his brow, the tension in his jaw. You said you should have guarded contact. From me? Or for me? For you. He tied off the bandage. And for the child. She turned fully toward him, blanket sliding at her waist. Why does that matter to you? His answer came after a long pause. Because your body has been treated like public property by men who call it law. I will not join their number. The words landed with the force of a vow. He stood, set the used cloths in the basin, and moved to the far side of the room, where a warped cabinet leaned against stone. From it, he took a wooden folding screen painted with faded mountain scenes and opened it between the cot and hearth. If you need to wash or change bindings, he said, still facing away, I can wait in the corridor. She stared at the screen, absurdly close to tears over a piece of battered wood. Privacy. He had given her privacy in a border tower with soldiers at the door and hunters somewhere beyond the rain. I can manage, she whispered. He inclined his head and stepped outside. The corridor murmured, then quieted when he spoke in a tone too low for words to carry. Luna moved behind the screen, hands clumsy with exhaustion, and cleaned mud from her skin in small sections with warm water from the basin. Every movement tugged at aches she had stopped naming. She washed rain and marsh grit from the old rejection scar and the new ritual wound, then sat on the edge of the cot, breathing through a sudden wave of nausea. I am in a locked room with a male who could overpower me in a heartbeat, and I am safer than I was in my own temple. That should not exist. I keep waiting for the trapdoor to open, for kindness to become a debt called in with interest, for his hand to turn from careful to claiming. Nothing in me knows how to stand in this and not flinch. My body keeps recognizing him anyway. Pulse, answering pulse, scent rising when he is near. Then shame hits because I was taught this is ruin. This is proof I am weak. This is how women get taken twice. But he asked. He keeps asking. He is holding a line even when it costs him. If trust is a bridge, I am still on the first plank with the river beneath me. I am still shaking. I am also still walking. When she called him back in, he returned with his eyes on her face, never scanning her body for advantage. He handed her a clean shirt from Tower Stores, too big in the shoulders but dry, then crouched by her boots again. Your feet will swell more if we do not loosen the seams, he said. May I? She gave a small nod. He worked a bone awl through the leather eyelets, widening each gap by a grain so the boots would flex without scraping raw skin. Then, as if this were the most ordinary thing in the world, he relaced them for her and set them beside the cot. Somewhere between those motions her fear shifted shape. It did not vanish. It uncoiled enough for breath. He offered her the broth once more, thinner now but still warm. She drank slowly, grimacing when her stomach turned. Marcus pretended not to notice the grimace and said, with a dry edge that almost counted as humor, Bren says this is soup. Bren is a patriot and a liar. A weak laugh escaped her before she could stop it. The sound startled both of them. There, he said, and the ghost of that near smile touched his mouth. Proof, we are not dead yet. By first light the storm had thinned to mist, and pale gray seeped through the arrow slits. Luna drifted in and out of sleep, each doze a trapdoor into temple memories. In one dream, Kale stood over her with ash on his hands, reciting purity doctrine while the crowd chanted blight. She jerked awake with her hands over her abdomen and a cry lodged in her throat. Marcus was at the hearth, sharpening nothing, blade untouched on his knee. He had been keeping watch all night. "It is all right," he said softly. "You are in the East Tower." Her breathing refused to slow. He set the whetstone aside and, from where he sat, began to hum that same old warrior lullaby, low and steady, a cadence built for frightened hearts and long marches. No spell, no glamour, just repetition and presence. She listened until her pulse eased. "That song," she said hoarsely, "belongs to royal war camps." His eyes met hers over the fire. "Yes." "You keep answering questions with one word, only when one word is true." Footsteps pounded up the stairwell. The braided sentry from last night appeared at the door, face set. "Sir, riders from south and west reach the garrison at dawn. Pure Fang writs are posted on every gate. Captain Edrin requests immediate transfer if we mean to register her protection before noon challenge." Marcus stood at once. "Prep wagon, for escort. Full log copies." The sentry's gaze flicked toward Luna, then back. "There may be trouble at the yard." "There will be trouble," Marcus said. "We go anyway." He turned to Luna. "The garrison archive can seal your status in border record. Once logged under my claws, Kale cannot claim you through temple decree without contesting crown law in public." Crown law. He had stopped hiding the shape of it. She swung her legs off the cot and reached for her boots. Pain flared from her lower back to her hips, and she bit down on the sound. Marcus crossed the room and dropped to one knee in front of her again, waiting. "May I help?" This time she did not hesitate. "Yes." He slid each boot on, careful around swelling, and laced them with quick, competent hands. Then he offered his forearm as a brace while she stood. She took it. The contact sent that deep thrum through her chest again, less shocking now, more like a current she was learning not to fear. They left the tower through the inner yard, where wind carried wet iron, horse sweat, and wood smoke from cook fires relit after storm. 4 soldiers fell in around them without question. Marcus kept Luna on his right, closest to the wall, his body angled to block the open approach. The gesture was subtle. It was also absolute. The frontier garrison sat 2 miles north, a squat stone complex built around a drill square and supply sheds, its gate crowned by the old compact crest. As their wagon rolled in, Luna saw the posted writs nailed to the entry board. Her name was written in thick black strokes beneath the cult seal. Cursed vessel. Return for purification. 3 guards at the inner checkpoint recognized her before the wheels stopped. "That is her," one barked, stepping forward with a hooked spear. "By decree of Pure Fang, surrender the vessel." Marcus jumped down first and turned to help Luna descend. "She is under border protection." The second guard spat near the wagon wheel. "Border law does not override sacred purification." "It does here," Marcus said. The third guard, younger and loud with borrowed certainty, reached for Luna's arm. "She does not walk free in this yard." Marcus moved between them in a single step. The young guard's blade came up with the motion, quick and stupid, and sliced across Marcus's forearm just below the sleeve seam. Cloth parted, red welled in a narrow line. Luna flinched forward, then froze, as Marcus threw his uninjured arm back, shielding her without looking away from the men in front of him. "Stand down," he said. The words cracked through the yard. Soldiers on the walls turned. Stable hands stopped mid-stride. Even the horses went still, ears pinned. The young guard stared at the blood on his knife, suddenly aware of what he had done. The first guard lifted his spear again, less certain now. "Captain will decide jurisdiction." "Then fetch him," Marcus replied. Captain Edrin arrived from the command hall with 2 lieutenants and a ledger clerk clutching ink and board. He took in the scene at once. Luna pale and exhausted, Marcus bleeding but unbowed, 3 checkpoint guards on the edge of mutiny. Report! Edrin snapped. The first guard spoke over the others. Purification writ valid in 5 territories, Captain. We are required to surrender the woman to Pure Fang retrieval. Edrin looked at Marcus. And you? Marcus held out his bleeding arm so the cut was visible to every witness in the square, then lowered it and spoke in formal cadence, each syllable carrying to the far wall. Under Crown Compact Article 9, Clause 4, I invoke royal protective custody over Luna Stormborn and her unborn heir pending tribunal review under pre-cult law. Any attempt to seize, harm, or transfer her without my consent constitutes treason against the throne and breach of border oath. Silence dropped so hard it rang. Edrin's face changed first from irritation to disbelief, then to rigid attention. Say your authority for the record. Marcus met his gaze. Marcus Ash Nightshade, blood-sworn heir of the Nightshade line, acting Alpha King. The ledger clerk's quill slipped from his fingers. Around the yard, wolves lowered their eyes, one by one, as recognition moved through ranks like wind through grass. Not everyone knelt. This was a garrison, not a court. But postures shifted, shoulders turning, lines redrawing in real time. Edrin pressed a fist to his chest. Authority recognized. He pointed to the 3 checkpoint guards. Disarm them. Detain pending inquiry. The young one began to protest. Captain, I did not know. You drew steel on protected blood in my yard. Edrin's voice was flat as stone. You are fortunate ignorance is still a legal word. 2 lieutenants moved in, taking weapons without struggle. The first guard glared at Luna as he was marched away, hatred sour in the air. She braced for Marcus to answer with threat or force. He did neither. He simply shifted half a step, placing himself where her line of sight no longer had to meet the man's. Clerk, Edrin said sharply, recovering command. Record invocation, witness names, injury incurred, and transfer to secured quarters under tower seal. The clerk snatched up his quill with shaking fingers and began to write. Marcus finally looked down at his forearm as if remembering it existed. Blood had soaked into the cuff, dark against gray wool. Luna caught his wrist before he could dismiss it. You are hurt because of me. His gaze softened, fierce and tired all at once. I am hurt because a man chose disobedience. You still stepped in front. Yes. No speeches, no theatrics, just yes. A medic approached with bandages and hovered, uncertain whether to touch the king without permission. Marcus nodded, and the medic wrapped the cut while Edrin barked orders for secured rooms and double watch rotations. Luna stood in the center of the yard, the writ with her name still nailed to the gate behind her, and felt the world tilt again, but differently this time, not through shock, through recognition. Power had always looked like Kale to her. Loud, cruel, hungry for witnesses. Marcus's power looked like restraint that held under pressure, like law used as shield instead of chain, like a man bleeding in public and choosing not to turn that pain into spectacle. As they were escorted toward the inner keep, she reached for his hand deliberately, in full view of the square. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady, and for the first time since the temple steps, she did not feel like evidence being moved across a board. She felt, dangerously, like someone being protected long enough to decide her own fate. She felt, dangerously, like someone being protected long enough to decide her own fate. And that feeling lasted exactly until the inner keep doors closed behind them, and Captain Edrin handed Marcus a sealed strip of black wax stamped with Kale's signet. Marcus broke it with his thumb. Luna watched his face as he read, saw the muscle in his jaw lock, then release with deliberate control. Read it aloud, Edrin said quietly, for the clerk and 2 witnesses standing in the hall. Marcus did. By authority of Pure Fang Tribunal, Luna Stormborn has been abducted by false claimants and is to be recovered for sanctified adjudication at the Blood Eclipse Assembly. Any border command refusing transfer will be named traitor to Wolfkind and cleansed. He lowered the message. Signed, Cale Stormborn. Witnessed by 5 seers. Countersigned by Council Elder Thorn. The clerk made a small, strangled sound. Elder Thorn sat on the Interpack Council that had once sworn neutrality in bloodline disputes. If his seal was real, Cale had reached farther than doctrine and fear. He had reached into governance. Luna took one step forward. Blood Eclipse Assembly where? Edrin answered without softening it. Ancient stone circle at Blackglass Ridge. The exact place she had heard through the prison wall. Marcus looked to her, and in that look, she read calculation layered over anger and something sharper, almost guilt, as if he had expected this move and hoped for one more day. He wants spectacle, he said. He will force witnesses and call it purification. He means to turn you into proof text. Proof of what? That rejected wolves remain broken. That any gifted bloodline outside his control is contamination. Edrin's voice was flat. If he stages this under seer projection, frightened packs will kneel to him by dawn. A runner entered at speed, mud up to his knees. South Relay confirms more writs, Captain. They say the acting king forged Clause 4 to steal a Stormborn claimant and crown bastard law. Edrin swore under his breath and dismissed him. 3 days remained to the eclipse. The number settled over the room like iron. Marcus turned to the clerk. Copy that message to the archive, then test the Elder Seal against compact records. If the wax is counterfeit, I want proof by sunset. If it is genuine, I want every signature Thorn has made in the last 6 months. As the clerk hurried out, Luna felt the old fear try to close around her throat. Cale had never wanted her dead in a ditch. He wanted her visible, accused, and controlled at the center of a ritual that made terror look legal. She had seen him build crowds into weapons before. Now he meant to do it across territories. Marcus touched the small of her back, asking without words if he could guide her onward. She nodded, and they moved into a secure chamber where a medic finished binding his forearm. The cut was clean, but deeper than it had looked in the yard. Leave us, Marcus told the medic when the knot was tied. When the door shut, silence returned, heavy and close. Luna stood by the narrow window slit, watching drill lines in the courtyard below. Wolves crossed stone in quick, purposeful strides. Messengers mounted. Gates opened, closed, opened again. A fortress bracing for ideological siege, not just blades. Marcus remained seated for a moment, shoulders bowed under the weight of names and laws. Then he rose and crossed to her. I did not tell you soon enough, he said. Kyle expected that. He built this accusation to force me into the open and make my protection look like possession. She turned to face him fully. Tell me now. His expression sharpened with decision. I disappeared from court 2 years ago after 3 assassination attempts tied to council votes on bloodline rights. Cale called it cowardice. It was strategic retreat while we mapped his network. He grew faster than we projected. He infiltrated border clergy, then supply courts, then seers. His endgame was never one pack. It was doctrinal monarchy with himself as purifier-in-chief. And me? You are Stormborn by direct maternal line. You survived a public rejection and did not break in the way his doctrine requires. If you rebond and rise publicly, his entire theology cracks. He hesitated. Our bond makes that crack a fracture. She held his gaze. So I am both person and political threat. Yes. His answer carried no evasion. And I am asking you to let me keep you alive while we dismantle him. The candor hurt more than any gentle lie. It also steadied her. By the second bell afternoon, the sky had cleared into hard autumn blue, and reports arrived faster than the clerks could stack them. Two northern outposts had refused Pure Fang riders and now faced supply embargoes from cult-aligned traders. One river ferry denied Luna passage by name despite never seeing her face. Three minor alphas sent formal inquiries asking whether Marcus had coerced a vulnerable female under false royal claim. Kale's story was spreading exactly as designed, each lie adapted to the fears of whoever heard it. Luna sat at the strategy table with maps, message copies, and an older archivist named Sarah, who smelled of ink and cedar. Sarah laid out a charcoal sketch of Black Glass Ridge, outer standing stones, inner moonstone disk, drainage channels cut like spokes. Blood Eclipse rights here were banned a century ago, Sarah said. Not for power shortage, for abuse potential. If Kale is reconstructing the array, he needs a living stormborn anchor and a witnessed accusation to stabilize collective belief. Belief is fuel, Luna murmured. Sarah nodded. Precisely. Marcus listened from the opposite side of the table, arms braced, head bent over route options. The bond pulsed in the room like a second weather system, never loud, never gone. Whenever he came within arm's reach, awareness prickled along Luna's spine. When he stepped away to answer a courier, the distance registered in her body with humiliating precision. I am still afraid of wanting him. I am afraid of wanting anyone after what was done in the name of law. Wanting used to mean vulnerability, and vulnerability used to be a sentence. But this is different, and I can feel it in details too small to fake. The way he asks, the way he waits, the way he does not turn urgency into entitlement. I keep expecting the old script to return. It does not. My pulse keeps recognizing him anyway, and each recognition asks a harder question than survival. Not can I live? Can I be seen and remain whole? At dusk, Marcus found her in the record room where she was copying names from forged witness lists. Lamp glow carved bronze shadows along his cheekbones. Fatigue roughened his voice. Edrin recommends immediate relocation through the hidden pass tonight, he said. Safer terrain, fewer legal choke points. The same hidden pass from childhood stories, the one that led west into neutral mountain holds. Flight disguised as prudence. Luna set down her pen. If I vanish now, Kale gets what he wants. He names me stolen, broken, voiceless, and every outcast female hears that verdict for another generation. Living to fight later is not surrender. Sometimes it is. She stepped closer. You told me he needs spectacle. Then we strip him of it in public, not by hiding. He searched her face for hesitation and found none. The tension between them drew tight, bright, dangerous. His hand lifted as if to touch her cheek, stopped a breath away, and fell. Do not make strategy from guilt, he said softly. I am making strategy from pattern. Her voice shook, then steadied. He stages rights. He buys witnesses. He weaponizes shame because shame keeps people silent. I will not stay silent. Marcus exhaled, long and controlled. Then we prepare for confrontation. On our terms, not his. A horn blew from the west wall. One sharp note, two short, one long. Edrin slammed into the room without knocking. Outer gate breach attempt, disguised pilgrims carrying purification badges. We detained 6, but another group slipped through Muleyard with seer mirrors. Signal interference across the south corridor. Marcus moved instantly. Lock Lunar Archive. Pull Luna to Vault 2. A second horn answered from inside the keep. Too close. The corridor outside erupted into running boots and shouted commands. Luna grabbed the map tube and shoved it into Sarah's arms. If I am separated, get this to Bren at East Tower. Sarah nodded once and vanished through the back stair with 2 clerks. Marcus drew a short blade with his uninjured hand and offered Luna the long utility knife from his belt. Only if needed. She took it. Metal felt honest in her palm. They reached the landing above the mule yard just as smoke canisters burst below, flooding the lower arcade with stinging gray haze. Figures in pilgrim cloaks tore off outer robes, revealing leather armor marked with pure fang crescents. Not zealots chanting at an altar now, trained retrieval squad. "Target is the vessel," one shouted. "Alive, move." Arrows cracked against stone. A garrison guard fell to one knee with a shoulder hit, cursing but conscious. Marcus shoved Luna behind a column and stepped into the line of approach, blade low, posture balanced like a gate hinge that would not fail. Two attackers rushed him together. He disarmed the first with a wrist turn and drove the second backward with a shoulder strike. No flourish, no wasted force. Luna saw a third come wide on the flank, aiming past Marcus toward her position. She moved without thinking, slashed the man's sleeve at the forearm, and sent his knife skittering down the stairs. He recoiled, stunned that she had answered at all. "Do not touch me," she said, voice raw and ringing. A seer mirror on the far wall flickered to life through smoke. Kale's face resolved in fractured silver, eyes bright with triumph. "Cousin," he said, amplified across the yard, "you always did mistake defiance for strength." Marcus angled himself between the mirror and Luna, but Kale kept speaking, each word designed for every listening soldier. "Witness this treason. A false king steals a marked female and calls it mercy. Bring her to Black Glass Ridge at moonrise tomorrow, and I will permit lawful hearing. Refuse, and every command that harbors you will be declared blood unclean." He lifted one hand inside the mirror frame. Runes burned across his skin in harsh white lines, then crawled over the glass and into the chamber wards. The floor stones answered with a shudder. Sarah's map tube, still in Luna's memory like a pulse, suddenly made sense. Spoke channels, anchor points, belief as fuel. Kale was not merely threatening from afar. He had piggybacked the keep's relay wards through the seized mirrors and was seeding a remote bind. Marcus shouted toward the stairwell, "Break every mirror now." Edrin's reply came from below, tight with strain. "Already trying. They are ward-locked." The nearest wall sigil split with a crack like ice. Blue fire raced along the mortar lines, climbed the arch, and dropped a slab of stone into the corridor behind them, cutting off retreat to Vault 2. Smoke thickened. Alarm bells hammered. Through the mirror, Kale smiled, patient and cruel. "Choose quickly," he said. "Come to the circle and speak your truth, or let your shelters burn under your name." Another arch trembled, then gave way. The landing lurched beneath Luna's boots as masonry crashed into the stairwell, and she realized with sudden cold clarity that Kale had turned the garrison itself into a countdown. Stone dust sprayed across the landing as another section of arch split, and Luna understood that if they stayed inside the keep, Kale would bury everyone who had given her shelter and call it righteous consequence. Marcus caught her arm and pulled her through the smoke toward the inner stair, blade still in his hand. "We fall back to vault level." "No." She coughed hard, eyes burning. "That is what he wants. He has linked your wards to his right." Kale's mirrored image laughed, fractured by cracks racing across the glass. "She learns quickly. Bring her to me, Nightshade, and I might spare this garrison's foundations." A blue-white surge snapped through the corridor sigils and threw heat over their faces. One of Edrin's lieutenants slammed a hammer into the nearest seer mirror, but the surface only rippled and sealed itself again, runes crawling like live wire across the frame. Below, in the mule yard, cloaked infiltrators pushed through smoke and shouted purification slogans while garrison wolves met them shield to shield. Edrin reached the landing, blood on his temple, voice like gravel. "South Barracks evacuated. We are losing the east supports." Luna stepped toward the mirror despite Marcus's grip tightening on her sleeve. "Kyle, if this is about lawful hearing, you do not need collapsing stone to ask for it." "It is not about law." His smile sharpened. "It is about obedience witnessed at scale." Marcus moved in front of her, shoulders squared to the glass. "You have your answer. You will not touch her." Kyle ignored him and fixed on Luna. "The eclipse is in 3 days, and black glass convenes before it. Arrive kneeling, and these soldiers live to see winter. Hide, and every pack that harbors you burns under my decree. The mirror went dark. At once, 3 corridor sigils detonated in sparks, and the stair behind them dropped half a level with a roar. Wolves shouted below as debris crashed through the lower passage. Luna grabbed Marcus's wrist. He is throttling the keep through the relay line. If we cut the source at the circle, this stops. We can still take the hidden pass tonight, Marcus said. I can move you west under Crown escort and break his network from distance. She stared at the smoke, the cracked stones, the soldiers dragging wounded comrades toward the yard gate. From distance means days. He is counting on days. For one hard heartbeat, he looked like he might refuse her outright. Then Edrin barked from the stairwell. Decision now, my king. Luna answered first. Open the west postern. I am going to Blackglass. Marcus's gaze locked to hers, fierce and stripped bare. If we do this, we do it with terms. My term is simple, she said. No more running while he writes my name into doctrine. By the time they reached the west postern, the garrison bells had shifted from alarm to evacuation cadence. Edrin sent 12 riders, Bren from the watchtower, Sarah with the map tube strapped across her back, and 2 shield wolves carrying iron mirror shrouds to smother any new relay surfaces. Marcus mounted beside Luna, not ahead, and handed her the reins only after she nodded that she wanted them. They rode through pine-dark ravines under a hard rising moon, hooves striking sparks from stone. Behind them, faint and intermittent, the keep still groaned with ward strain, but the surges came slower as distance stretched the relay. Sarah rode up once and shouted over the wind, "Clerk tested Thorn's seal before we left. Wax was genuine, signature was not. Layered forgery." "Logged," Luna called back. "Logged and witnessed." A thread closed in her chest. Evidence. Recorded. Not rumor. Blackglass Ridge rose ahead as a ring of standing stones against silver sky. Kyle had already built his stage. Torches burned in concentric circles. Seer mirrors stood on tripods between carved pillars, angled outward to project across territories. Wolves filled the outer ring. Cult zealots in white-black crescents, uncertain pack delegates, mercenaries who smelled of coin and fear. At the center, the moonstone disk gleamed wet as bone, carved with a sacrificial array of spoke lines and binding knots. Kale waited at the inner ring in ceremonial white, arms bare, runes blazing down both forearms. "How dutiful," he called as Luna dismounted. "The vessel arrives under escort." Marcus dismounted beside her and let his cloak fall open just enough that every eye could see the nightshade crest at his belt. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, then quieted when Kale lifted his hand. Luna stepped forward before Marcus could speak. "You asked for a hearing. I am here." Kale tilted his head, almost affectionate. "You are here because you break things by existing." She walked into the stone circle by choice. The first binding line ignited around her ankles, thin as drawn silver, then rose to her knees. Cold pressure tightened, not cutting, just locking. Kale began the chant in old temple cadence, projecting toward the mirrors so every seer-linked pack could hear. Accusation followed, accusation. Traitor blood, false bond, stolen protection, cursed womb. Each phrase fed the lattice and thickened the light around her legs. Marcus took one step toward the ring. 4 cult enforcers leveled spears at his chest. He did not move again, but Luna felt him there, coiled and waiting. "I am standing in the shape he built for my ending. I smell ash and torch pitch and wet stone, and my pulse is loud enough to drown the crowd. Fear says, bow your head and survive this minute. Shame says he named you first, so let him name you last. But another truth is louder now. I choose where my body stands. I choose what my voice carries. I choose what my child hears from me when this night is remembered. Not silence, not apology. If law is a weapon, I can turn its edge. If ritual is a cage, I can redraw its door. My hands are shaking. I am still moving. She bit the inside of her palm, let blood bead, and dropped to one knee at the moonstone as if yielding. Kale smiled and raised both arms for the final condemnation. Luna pressed her blood to the central rune and dragged a new line across the spoke intersection, reversing the knot geometry Sarah had shown her in charcoal. Once, twice. A cross-current snapped through the array. The ring around her legs burst outward in a blinding lattice that climbed every standing stone. Kale's chant broke mid-word. The truth binding took hold. He tried to recover by shouting, "She came here willingly to confess corruption." And the lie answered instantly. A burning script flared across his throat, the words of his own falsehood stamped in red-white light. Gasps tore through the outer ring. Luna rose, voice carrying through the mirrors. "Say the names you paid to testify at the temple." Kyle snarled. "I paid no one," and fresh brands streaked over his forearms, matching the phrase in jagged runes. She turned to the crowd. Rellin Voss, Mira Holt, Taven Reed, all listed in forged ledgers, signed under coercion and debt transfer. A female delegate in river blue stepped forward, trembling. "My brother is Taven. He disappeared after that hearing." Kyle whipped toward her. "Silence." The lattice flared again, burning silence into his wrist where everyone could see. Murmurs became shouts. Two cult lieutenants backed away from the inner ring, faces gone gray. Luna did not stop. Council Elder Thorne's signature was forged and logged before witnesses at the frontier garrison. Captain Edrin holds record copy. Ask for it. More movement in the outer ring now, not panic but realignment. Wolves who had come for spectacle began to look at one another instead of at Kale. His control cracked. He seized an obsidian spear from the altar stand and lunged toward Marcus with a howl that had no ceremony left in it. "You hid behind law because you were too weak to rule." Marcus met the charge, caught the shaft with both hands, and twisted it offline without striking back. "I did not come to kill you." Kale drove a knee, trying to break past him toward the altar dagger. Luna slammed both palms onto the moonstone. Stormlight erupted silver gold from the rune she had redrawn, arcing up her arms and into the standing stones. Crackling bands snapped around Kale from throat to ankles and yanked him to his knees. The spear clattered away. He spat at her feet. "You were discarded because you are weak, and your child is an abomination." Luna stepped to the edge of the inner ring, breath harsh, power shaking through her bones. "I was discarded because you feared what love would prove." She lifted her blood-marked hand and spoke in formal cadence, the old crown language carrying through every mirror. "Kale Stormborn, by Truth Lattice Witness, I strip your alpha authority for forged tribunal, ritual abuse, and blood coercion under false doctrine." The bands tightened. The cult sigil at his throat split with a sound like brittle glass. His ritual staff, still propped at the altar, shattered down the grain and fell in two pieces across the stone. Around the circle, pure fang marks on subordinate officers dimmed or went dark entirely. One dropped to her knees, sobbing. Another tore his crescent badge from his collar and threw it into the fire. Kale, panting now, dragged himself an inch toward the altar dagger with the stubbornness of pure malice. Marcus stepped in front of the blade and kicked it out of reach, still refusing a killing strike. Luna gave the sentence. "Return to the right you built." She drove one final pulse through the inverted center rune. Moonfire rose from the carved spokes, pale and absolute, and wrapped Kale in his own ceremonial light. There was no spray, no spectacle of torn flesh, only brightness too intense to look at directly, and a single broken cry that cut off when the fire folded inward. When it cleared, he was gone, and his shadow mark remained burned into the stone where he had knelt. The seer mirrors flickered, then steadied, now showing only the silent ring, the broken staff, and Luna standing upright at the moonstone with her hand still glowing at the cut. For 3 breaths, no one moved. Then, from the outer circle, Captain Edrin's voice rang out like a struck bell. Witnessed and recorded. Edrin's words broke the spell of silence, and sound rushed back into the circle. Wolves breathing hard, torches snapping in the wind, someone weeping openly in the outer ring. Luna's knees threatened to fold now that the stormlight had gone, but Marcus was already there, stopping 1 pace away, hands open at his side so she could see he would not touch without leave. His voice was low enough for only her. "Luna, look at me." She did. His forearm was still bandaged from the garrison cut. Soot marked his jaw. The amber at the edge of his irises had not fully faded, and the bond between them pulsed like a live thread tugging at sternum and spine. The child shifted once, then settled. "I can carry you from this circle," he said, "or stand with you in it. Your choice." She reached for him first. "Stay." He exhaled like a man released from a blade at his throat, then stepped in and gathered her carefully, one arm around her shoulders, the other braced at her back above her belly. Heat moved through her on contact, not the violent surge from before, but a deep, anchoring current that eased the tremor in her muscles. Around them, wolves lowered their heads, giving space without being told. Marcus drew back just enough to search her face. "There is one more choice," he said. "No pressure, no debt. If you want it, I will claim you before witnesses under old law, and only if you claim me in return. If you do not, I am still yours to protect, unmarked, for as long as you ask." Luna heard distantly, Sarah ordering clerks to secure the mirrors and Edrin dispatching riders with sealed reports to every territory relay. Physical proof moving into record. Lies pinned before they could spread again. The practical sound steadied her. This was not fantasy. This was law, blood, and consequence. She lifted Marcus's hand and pressed it over her heartbeat. "I choose." His eyes closed for a beat. When they opened, something fierce and reverent looked out through them. He removed his cloak, bared the side of his throat and shoulder, then paused. "Say stop at any point. Only if you do too." He nodded, then turned her gently so moonlight struck the old rejection scar and the fresh ritual wound crossing it. His fingers framed her neck, never tightening, only supporting. Luna tipped her head, breath shaking, and gave him the line where old grief had lived for years. The bite came at the junction of neck and shoulder, precise and sure. Pain flashed bright, then changed almost instantly, spreading into warmth that flooded her chest, her spine, her abdomen. The tight knot behind her ribs loosened as if hands she had kept clenched since the temple finally opened. She felt him through it, his restraint, his hunger, his vow, not as intrusion, but as shared pulse. The mark flared beneath his mouth, and light traced outward in twin curves, weaving her former scar into a new sigil instead of erasing it. He released her at once and rested his forehead to hers, breathing hard. "Mine," he whispered, rough with wonder. "Only if you want the word." She touched the side of his face. "Yours." Then she took her turn. Marcus straightened and bowed his head to expose the base of his neck. The posture was not submission to rank. It was trust laid bare in front of every watching pack. Luna slid her hand into his hair to steady him and bit where pulse met muscle. He shuddered under her palms, a low sound torn from him, half pain and half relief, and his runes ignited in clean gold down both arms. The bond snapped fully into place. It was like doors opening all at once. She felt the cadence of his heartbeat as clearly as her own, the disciplined edges of his mind, the fierce protectiveness he had held leashed since the watchtower, and beneath all of it an astonished tenderness he had not dared name. He felt her answer in return. Terror survived, dignity reclaimed, love not as surrender, but as chosen ground. Their scents braided. The mate thread became visible in the moonlight, a fine strand of gold between their chests that brightened when they breathed together. Mate, he said against her temple. Mate, she answered. They stood holding each other while the circle watched the old doctrine die. By dawn, frost silvered Kale's shadow mark on the moonstone, and the stone circle had become a tribunal ground. Sarah sat at a long table of salvaged planks with 3 clerks, ink-stained and relentless, cataloging every seized item. Forged ledgers, paid witness rolls, the black wax strip with the genuine wax and falsified signature, shattered mirror frames, and Kale's broken staff. Bren arrived with the map tube intact and set it beside Sarah with a grim nod. "Delivered as ordered," he said. "Archive copy already sent to East Tower Vault." Captain Edrin read depositions aloud to the gathered delegates. Relin Voss and Mira Holt, brought under guard but unharmed, confessed to purchase testimony and named the debt collectors who coerced them. River delegates confirmed Taven Reed had been held in a Pure Fang store cell. He was recovered at first light during coordinated raids triggered by Edrin's night dispatches. The external reports that had once carried Kale's accusations now carried rebuttal, witness names, and seal tests signed by neutral clerks. The braided sentry from the watchtower stepped forward when called. "Name for record, Anya Pell," she said. "I relit the north lamp after the storm and kept it burning because it is the old compact signal for lawful sanctuary. Pure Fang riders saw it and rode anyway." Luna remembered the corridor whisper from that first night and understood the loaded hesitation at last. Anya had recognized more than a fugitive. She had recognized a line worth risking rank for. A courier from council arrived near midday with Elder Thorn in chains, alive and furious, shouting that he had never signed Kale's order. Under Truth Lattice questioning at the circle edge, his own steward confessed to forging in exchange for promised land grants. Thorn was stripped of vote and remanded for trial. His final glare at Luna carried old arrogance and, this time, no power. When the legal findings closed, Marcus stepped onto the inner stone and raised the crest Luna had seen carved into the watchtower foundation. The crowned wolf within thorns, crescent split by a vertical line. "The compact stands," he said, voice carrying across the ridge. "No exile decree outranks living law. No female is tribunal property. No child is leverage." He turned to Luna and knelt, not as theater but as declaration. "Luna Stormborn Nightshade, my chosen mate, will not stand behind me. She stands with me. Before these pacts, I crown her High Luna and co-ruler of the United Territories." Edrin brought the circlet, silver worked with storm motifs, and the split crescent of restored law. Marcus placed it on Luna's head with hands that did not shake. Then he rose and offered his arm. Luna faced the gathered wolves, one hand on the visible curve of her belly, the other linked with her mate. "Oath trials begin tonight," she said. "Architects of harm will answer publicly. Coerced followers who surrender weapons and give testimony will have restoration paths under supervision. Sanctuary charters for rejected wolves are now active in every border command that signs this crest. Bren was first to sign, Anya second, Sarah third, blotting ink with a laugh that cracked the tension for the first time in hours. "If anyone calls this a temporary measure," she muttered, "I will drown them in paperwork." Luna almost smiled, then did, brief and real. That night, in the repaired east chamber of the watchtower where it had begun, Marcus sat behind her on the cot and sang the old warrior lullaby while she leaned into his chest, fingers laced through his. The bond lay calm and settled, a steady thrum instead of a wound. Outside, no hunters came, no writs were nailed to the gate. Only wind, lantern light, and the sound of Anya's patrol changing shift on lawful schedule. Luna guided Marcus's hand to her abdomen when the child rolled. strong and unafraid. He pressed his palm there, eyes bright, and kissed the luminous mark at her shoulder. "No more exile," she whispered. "No more hiding," he answered. And for the first time, the future felt like a place already under construction, with both of their names written into its foundation.